Okay, so good morning everybody and welcome to the second day of the Catchment Data and Evidence Forum. And today we've got two really interesting webinars for you. So our first one this morning on rethinking data with the CaBA and Rivers Trust comms team, and then this afternoon at 2 o'clock with the Freshwater Habitats Trust looking at identifying important freshwater areas. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are recording the sessions today and we'll share them on the CaBA website after the event. And please use the Q&A function that you can find at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions to our presenters today. If we could ask you to use that function for questions, that would make it a lot easier for people to find them, and then use the chat for any general comments that you want to make or to share links to useful resources. And just once again to say thank you to the Interreg Watercog project again for supporting the project today. So I'm now delighted to welcome Jayne Mann and Emily Cooper, who work at the Rivers Trust in our communications team and are also part of the CaBA communications team, who are going to take us through this webinar on rethinking data. So I'll hand over to Jayne and Emily. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Hello, everybody. Let me just share my screen. Second. I never know how to do this seamlessly, so you'll just have to bear with me. Oh, hang on, let me stop that. I've done it wrong already. There we go. I think we're there. Emily, just give me a nod. Thanks. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm Jayne and I work for the Rivers Trust and also work on the CaBA communications as well. And you'll also be hearing from Emily, my colleague, who also works in the same team as me as a comms officer. So yeah, we're going to be talking about data visualisation today, and I think you had a little introduction to it in the keynote speech yesterday. So we'll be touching on some of the things that he covered and hopefully giving you some practical tools to help you actually put it into practice and create some beautiful data and infographics. So I'm going to be talking to you about the importance of good data visualization and also designing and planning a great story. Then Emily will take you through the practical ways to bring that data to life. So, I mean, this is quite obvious, and I'm sure you all know this, but obviously a picture is worth 1,000 words, and 90% of information absorbed by the brain is actually visual. And we process images 60,000 times faster than text, so it's well worth turning your long, lengthy reports into something beautiful that people can see in just a real quick snapshot and understand really quickly. So it kind of makes information much easier to digest, and they can also tell a story as well. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but I quite like this infographic about an infographic, which it sort of says that, you know, you've got your complex data, sort it out, get it arranged into practical segments, and then present it visually so someone can understand it easily. So an infographic is a pitch that blends data with design and tells a story. It can help organisations communicate complex information to their audiences really quickly. So just some sample infographics that we've done in the past. They're very blue on this selection, obviously. But you've probably seen this one on the left, which was our one from the benefits report, which we didn't actually pull the benefits report together, but the benefits working group did. But we pulled out, you know, a couple of infographics from that report and sectioned them off for social media. Then we also do our impact report every year. So if you've never seen our Rivers Trust review, do go and have a look at it, where it's sort of, it has case studies mixed with infographics, and we find that it's a really good way of just telling that story and giving the national picture. This 85% one is actually a moving infographic that we used in a survey we did about sewage. Yeah, just another different way of presenting information. And then this longer form one, which is all about the power of wetlands, which is more about storytelling, I guess, and something we used on social media to try and explain the problem and the solutions. So obviously too much data can be really overwhelming, so you have to be really selective of what you're going to show, and you have to think about what will have the greatest impact. And it's really important that you share only the most important data and try and keep the rest of the information in the context and in the blog that you're writing, or the report that you're writing. So a good example of this is actually in a recent report by the RSPB and other partners. I don't know if you saw it, the Troubled Waters report, I'm sure you did. So I just wanted to ask, like, what part of this page are you most drawn to? So, I mean, I don't know if you want to pop it in the chat, just which part you're most drawn to. I can't actually see the chat. Why can't I see the chat? Don't think I can see it actually. Emily, I don't know if you can see anyone's answers.
Yes, so we've got the valley, birds in the sky, 20 million chickens, 20 million, yeah. 20 million, 20 million.
Yeah, good. That's the right answer then. Well, yeah, the birds in the sky are pretty nice too, and the headline. But I think what you get from that is that, you know, these three pieces of information, that's, so you've got the birds, the river why, so where it is, and also this 20 million, which is pulling the stat out quite nice and clearly. So I think that's quite a nice way of doing a static infographic inside a report. So as I said, infographics don't have to be static, and here are some beautiful ones that I've picked out from WWF. This one's from one of their older reports down on the left. So this is a GIF, so it just automatically plays. This one I think is I think again it possibly was saved as a GIF, but I've seemed to have saved it as a video, but works just the same. And this one as well. And these two were from their Rivers of Food report, which, if you haven't seen, again is an excellent example of mixing a report with infographics and data. Really beautiful example. So this stat on the left is one that we've used before in our sewage survey report that we did last year. So when you're designing an infographic, these are the things that you need to consider. So you need to start thinking about what is the goal? So why are you doing it? What data is available? Is it accurate, honest, and consistent? Is there a story to tell that is relevant, meaningful, and new? And how will it look? So the best way to get started is to start off just listing off as many data set ideas as possible and just grow your idea from there. So this would be your seed. So your idea would be your seed. So just make a list of as many ideas as you can and filter out the best ones. Then think about what your goal is and apply that to the seed and see if it fits. So just be really explicit with what your goal is. What do you want to achieve by showing this data? Then think about who you're targeting with this information. So who do you want to show this data to? What do you want them to do as a result of showing this data? And is this the right concept? Which seed idea sort of answers the goal and target audience? So yeah, that's just, I think it's really important to make sure you've planned that out really carefully, so you're not just throwing data out there into the world that's kind of meaningless. So yeah, filter out the best ones, apply your goal, apply your target audience. So what metrics have you even got available? So it might be really good. So you've obviously got this like list of seed ideas, but actually you might not have that data available for you to do it. So you need to start thinking about that as well. But what something I learned, I did the Information is Beautiful course, which I really recommend, and I'll drop the link in at the end. And what they sort of started to make me think was you can really start thinking about your data 3 or 4 dimensionally. So you can compare data sets to other data sets, and that kind of creates an interesting answer to a question. So this example, which might not be that clear, but it's definitely worth going and having a look at after, is it shows dietary supplements, so evidence versus their popularity. So what scientific evidence is that these supplements versus how popular they are when people buy them. So the quantity of the evidence is shown up the right hand side, so there's no evidence down here, and then there's a strong evidence base up here. And the size of the bubble shows how popular it is. So I think that's quite, like, immediately, as soon as you understand that, what they're looking at showing you, you can see, for instance, that, you know, there's copper is really popular, but there's actually very little evidence that that is beneficial to you. There's various different forms of vitamin D here, but this one, vitamin D, is good for depression, but it's kind of inconclusive information on that. Ginger is actually really, really good for nausea and vomiting, and it's really popular. So I just thought that was a really interesting way to show information and have this data playing up against each other. So something we might look at in the Rivers Trust, for instance, which granted is a very simple idea, but just as a concept for this webinar, is what makes a river healthy. So that might be your idea that you want to start off with. So the goal would be to raise awareness of the state of rivers and the various things that impact rivers, river health. So the metrics that you might consider, there's quite a few metrics you could consider here. So you could look at the wealth of an area. So you could have, like, what, you know, does the wealth of an area, does that mean if it's quite an affluent area, does that mean the river is healthier? Or you could look at the number of barriers in that river and play that against how healthy it is, or the Water Framework Directive status, or whatever. The number of sewage outfalls, the amount of sewage spills, proximity of farms, species recorded. And you could just look at the different relationships between these two different data sets and see what brings out the most interesting analysis. So just think about what data you've got available that could make an interesting infographic, and start jotting those data sets down and start thinking about, oh, well, actually I could play that one against that other one, and that could actually bring up some really interesting information. You might have seen this yesterday. I totally stole it from Adam Frost's presentation yesterday. But I thought it was worth sharing because it was really, really excellent. So this is his planning. This is how he plans. And again, like I said, like, it's really important to plan your story. So what is the story? Ask yourself, what is the story? What are you trying to say? And then these are really good ways of sort of segmenting who's going to do the information, like sorting out the information, and which tools you're going to use. So just using this table alone, just to start off with, is really excellent. Who's the story for? So what's it going to look like? Is the story going to look right to the audience that you're targeting? And how are you going to put it together? Well, hopefully Emily can answer some of this for you. Because, I mean, who's doing it? I assume a lot of you will be doing it. Unfortunately, we don't often have, like, designers, illustrators, developers just available. So I think Emily will be able to help you with this bit. And then refine it. So how do I make the best possible version of this story? So some design tips from us are that people always look in the top right corner. So always show the most important information here. If the design is bad, people will perceive the data to be bad. So it's not worth putting really good information on a really shoddy design. So just consider that, because people will think the data is pretty shoddy. So just think about that. Change your design depending on the platform. So use short and snappy imagery with text on Instagram, but longer form infographics are best for LinkedIn and Pinterest. And yeah, that also works. If you have too much text on Instagram, for instance, I think they don't favour you and don't show your your images as much. So just think about that as well. Algorithms, that's it, isn't it? All of these different like algorithms of what they favour and what they don't favour. So just make sure you're considering that when you're pulling together your designs. So some considerations that you can change. So colours, obviously think about how they emit emotions. Different colours are associated with different emotions. Your typeface, you can have a really friendly typeface, or you can have a really professional, educational typeface. Think about visual hierarchy. So what do you need to show first? What information needs to be highlighted the most? And use grey to show less important information. So non-essential information can be shown in a nice grey, so it doesn't distract from the main point that you want to show. And remove any unnecessary information as well. So I'll pop these in the chat, but this is the training that I did, which was Information was Beautiful. I think it was around £100 for the day, and it was just so engaging, really fun. I got really enthusiastic. I loved it. So I do recommend it. And then we also found that The Guardian is doing a masterclass as well in October, which looks really reasonably priced as well. So I'll put that in the chat for you guys to have a look at. And now I'm going to hand over to Emily, who is going to go through how to practically visualise your ideas.
Great, thanks Jane. And I will just share my screen. Hopefully this goes seamlessly. Right, can we see that?
Yes.
Great start. Okay, good. So Jayne's given you a really excellent introduction to the kind of theory of data visualization and why it's so important. So here in the title, I've got Making Beautiful Story Maps, but this isn't exclusively about story maps. You can apply the information that I'm about to give you to pretty much any format, whether that's a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, or a PDF. So essentially what I'm going to do is give you the most simple tools to help you visualize your data. And if you attended the keynote yesterday, somebody at the end asked, how can we actually start applying this? And I think the speaker replied that you could ask your designer for some help, but obviously a lot of us don't have that. So I'm going to give you the simplest ways to do that. So first of all, I'm going to give you a little introduction to story maps, just in case you haven't worked with them before. We're going to look at how to source beautiful photos and videos. We're going to look at how to highlight key statistics and visualizations. Then we're going to look briefly at adding animations and creating beautiful graphs and charts. So if you don't know what a story map is, it's a fantastic science communication tool. So they are part of the ArcGIS online platform, and they were originally intended for showcasing maps in particular, but they really are a great all-round science communication tool. So as you can see, you can include all sorts of different things. You can include graphs, maps, text, and it's basically just a fantastic way of illustrating your research in a very visual way. And because it is such a visual platform, it's most impactful when it is accompanied by visualizations which demonstrate the research that you're speaking about. But as I said, this isn't exclusive to story maps, so the methods I'm going to talk about you could use in whatever format you wanted to. So first of all, we are going to look at how to source beautiful images and videos. So story maps are a very visual platform, and you can actually tell a huge portion of your story through your images. You have to kind of think of it like a children's book. Obviously, we're not aiming our content at children, but it's just a great way to engage your reader. So if your reader can see images of what you're talking about, it really helps them to develop that emotive connection to what you're saying to them, and helps them to visualize it and turns it from some text on a page into something that they can actually see and connect with in their head. But that is entirely dependent on the quality of the images. Nobody likes low resolution, pixelated images. That doesn't really help you to communicate. And in some cases that can even weaken what you're saying. But it's incredibly hard to find those high quality images that we need, particularly when we're talking about very specific topics. So in terms of online stock photography websites, Pexels, Unsplash and CaBA are all good options. They have photos and videos, and you can actually whittle it down to be very specific. For example, if you were looking for a photo of a specific river, I've found that you can generally find those as long as you're specific in your search terms. So Pexels and CaBA, those two libraries are actually included in Canva, which is an online design platform, which I'll speak about later. So if you don't want to trawl through multiple libraries, using Canva is actually a really good option. So this is a really great way to source images which are kind of generic and just help us to make something which is a bit more visually appealing. But obviously we're communicating very specific things, and you might want something a bit more bespoke, which actually illustrates your data and your research. So we're going to look at how you can do that. So Jayne already showed you this little graphic earlier, but here it is in context of the story map that we used it in. So on the left, you have your body of text, and on the right, you have the graphic, and I will just press play again. It has a little animation as well. So immediately, as you're scrolling down the story map, just having that pop of color, having that text pulled out, and having the animation immediately draws your eye. So if you are just scrolling, that will catch your eye and you will stop. You'll see the statistic, and then you'll actually go and read the text on the left to find out what we want you to know. And that's why it's so important you pull out these key statistics and illustrate them, because by doing that, you can essentially decide what your reader will take away from your report. So it's so easy to actually get the information that you want to have in your reader's head. You just need to make it appealing to them, so that will be what sticks with them at the end of the day. So I'm just going to show you how effective this can be. So yeah, creating simple visualizations is a fantastic way to boost engagement, and you don't need to put a huge amount of effort into it. It can be an incredibly quick process. So like Jayne said, there are lots of different ways to do this. Highlighting important information, adding pops in color, and introducing illustrations all serve to draw the reader's eye, and again, start to reinforce what you want your reader to remember. So here on the left, we have the statistic, just in plain text. 1 in 4 people surveyed had suffered with an illness linked to the ingestion of river water. I mean, I think that's a pretty impactful statistic, but presented as it is on the page, I'm not entirely convinced that I would be particularly drawn to that. And it is actually a really important piece of information that we want people to be drawn to. So this is just a quick example of how you could make that more visually appealing. So we've added that pop of color, we've drawn out the key statistic, and we've added a very simple illustration just to make it a bit more impactful. So I hope that you agree with me in that your eye is kind of drawn towards the right, and that's exactly what we want. Everything we're doing is basically, we're trying to be a peacock, we're trying to attract attention to the things that we want people to pay attention to. So I'm just going to show you how easy this is, because it really is incredibly easy. And I'm just going to ask you a quick question through a poll, just to see how many people are currently using Canva. So please vote and let me know if you currently use Canva or if you've heard of it. Just give you a minute. Okay, has everyone had time to answer. I'm not sure if I can see the results or not, so Jayne, you might have to help me. Oh no, I can see them, it's all good. Okay, wow, so lots of you don't use Canva, or you haven't used it, but you have heard of it. So I think probably the first thing to do when you're going away from this webinar today, if you are interested in data visualization, I would sign up for an account with Canva. So it is graphic design software, it's online. It is totally free to use, but if you get a subscription, you get access to more features. And it's been so helpful for me because I'm not a designer by background. And it really kind of guides you through the graphic design process and makes it really easy. And if you're a non-profit, there is even more reason to sign up because you get a free premium subscription. And I cannot stress how useful it is, and I use it every day. So I will just show you how easy it is to turn this into something more impactful. So here we are just pulling out that key statistic that we want people to take notice of. And then we can blow it up a bit bigger just to continue drawing the eye. And then change the colour to our brand colours. And Canva has this really neat little feature where they have a bunch of basic graphs and charts, which are really good for this basic level of data visualization. So we're going for this little people one because it's a really good way of showing that. And we're just adjusting that to show the data that we have. And then again, switching to our brand colours. And then once you've finished, you can export this as a PNG or as a JPEG or even as a PDF or anything if you wanted to. So that can be embedded directly into a story map or into a Word document. And in about 30 seconds, you've taken that simple statistic and made it into something which is a lot more engaging and is a lot more likely to catch your reader's attention. And it is genuinely that easy. So we can take this a step further, and as Jayne said earlier, your infographics don't actually need to be static. They can have a bit of an animation. I'll just do that again in case, because that's quite quick. So particularly with the story maps format, if you've used story maps before, they're essentially incredibly long documents, so you have to scroll through the whole thing. And I think we're all guilty of kind of doing this whole mindless scrolling process where we're not actually absorbing information. So particularly in the story maps format, I think simple animations like this can be incredibly impactful because you're just scrolling and then suddenly something actually moves on the page and that causes you to stop and actually absorb that information. So again, this is an incredibly simple process. So I will just show you using this incredibly scientific and research-backed statistic that 100% of dogs are good dogs. So in Canva, you can animate all of the elements on the page so they are all styled in the same way, as you can see. I'm just demonstrating a few of the animations here, so don't worry, I won't make you sit through all of them. And if you want something more subtle than that, you can actually just animate single elements on the page like this. So it's just a very subtle pop of movement, which will encourage your reader to look a bit further into it. And then actually animate it, that would be helpful, yeah. And then, so once you've finished with your animation, you can then download it as an MP4 video or a GIF. Both of these can be embedded into story maps, or you could share it on social media. Either way, it's a really good way to create simple animations which will enhance your data visualization. So obviously that's a very, very simple animation, and to create animations in the style that Jayne showed earlier, it would require a little bit more input from you. So if you do want to look into doing more advanced animations, you might want to consider getting specialist animation software. So free animation software, truly free animation software, is incredibly hard to find, but one of the best options that I found is something called OpenToonz. And so it's intended for creating, feature-length cartoons. So it is a complex bit of software, but if you do want to commit to learning it, then it could be a really good option for creating more complex animations. And then the go-to paid option would be Adobe Creative Cloud. So they have a whole suite of apps, and After Effects is the dedicated animation software. but Photoshop can also be used. After Effects has a pretty steep learning curve, so if you already know how to use Photoshop, it might be a good idea to start off there. But with After Effects, you know, what you can do with that is pretty much limitless. So if you really do want to start animating things like that are a bit more complex, then that would probably be the choice to go for. So with animations, there are a couple of rules that you should probably stick by, but it's incredibly tempting to use them everywhere, but that's not necessarily the most impactful thing to do. So do use animations occasionally to pique your reader's interest, just as a little flash of something a bit different. It will keep them interested in what you're saying and keep their engagement up, but don't animate every single statistic, because then it just becomes boring. And especially if you're scrolling on mobile, it can even become quite jarring. So do use animations for simple data explanations, because in these circumstances, it's been shown that long-term memory retention of information is actually enhanced by the inclusion of animations. But don't expect your animations to be effective when explaining complex topics, unless you're an amazing animator, which I am not. So obviously, sometimes pulling out these key statistics is enough, and that's all we need to do. But if you've got an entire data set that you want to communicate with your audience, you might need to do something a bit different. So Flourish is by far the best software I have found for this. It's specifically intended for data visualization. So while you might still choose to rely on Excel or Stat Plus or whatever for data processing, this is what I would recommend for actually visualizing your data once you're finished with it. So it's a completely free service, so you have access to everything without paying, but there is a small catch in that once you publish your data, it is accessible in the public domain. So if you are dealing with sensitive data sets, then you might want to choose to pay for the subscription. If you're not, then it's completely free. So I'll just give you a quick tour of Flourish. So here you have all of the standard, oh no, I can't see the play button. There it is. All of the standard graphs, so you know, your bar charts, your column charts, your donut charts, your pie charts, line charts, and then you can even do mapping through it. You can do scatter plots, violin plots. You can make these more visual elements, which you can embed like carousels. Essentially, the possibilities are pretty much endless. And I don't think I've even used it to its full capacity, but as you can see, there are so many different starting points you can use to illustrate your data in a graph or a chart. So we're going to start off just showing you how simple it is to use Flourish. So as you can see, it animates, which is already really cool. So you can change the colors, and you can have your brand palette in there. You can change the appearance of the lines. You can add a legend. You can add pop-ups, and obviously the most exciting thing, the animations. So I'll just show you what it looks like in the back end. So this is how you input data. You can either copy and paste, type it in yourself, or upload the data via an Excel spreadsheet, and then you would publish it, which I'm not actually going to do. And then if you see here on the right-hand side, I've cut it off a little bit by accident, but there are a number of filters that you can use. And by doing this, you can actually visualize data in a really interactive way. So I'll give you an example of that in a minute, but just to compare Excel and Flourish for data visualization. Hang on, there we go. So as you can see, the one on the right is Flourish with that animation that really excites me. And then on the left is Excel. But I think even without the animation, I think the one on Flourish looks so much more slick, and it's so much easier to get it looking slick. I don't know if anyone else is like me, but I used to spend hours on Excel trying to make really slick, modern looking graphs, and it is an uphill battle. But that's what Flourish is designed for. It makes it easy and it holds your hand through that entire design process. And this line chart is just the basics of what Flourish can do. So I'll just show you this packed bubble chart. So cool, you can filter things, you can then, your user can actually click into the different sections, like so, and then see additional information inside of those sections. And this is obviously about movies, so not entirely relevant to us, but it's just a really great example of what can be done with Flourish. And as I said, I don't think I've even explored its full capabilities yet, so it's definitely something to look out for, and I will pop a link in the chat if you would like to have a little go with it. So just before we finish the questions, I just wanted to have one more poll. So would you like more training in data visualization? And that would be from a professional. I'll just give you a minute or two to answer that. Okay, has everyone had time to answer? Oh, great. Okay, so 77% of you would like further training in data visualization. That's really exciting. So yeah, we will look into arranging that and let you know more details in due course. Fantastic. So we would now like to open the floor for any questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen, that would be helpful.
Just while people are thinking maybe if they've got any questions, I just wanted to say thank you to Jayne and Emily for that really insightful presentation. It's great. I know you've done some similar things internally for us, and I know as soon as you've done it, it's like you want to go away and look at Flourish and Canva and think about how you can make the graphics that you're working on more interactive. So it's really helpful to have those sort of really practical insights that we can go away and do, rather than just thinking about, you know, really fancy graphics where you might need to pay expensive designers. You've actually shown us some ways that people working in partnerships can straight away improve the sort of graphics and visualizations of what they're doing. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what's quite interesting. I think when you go to some of these training sessions, they do sort of think that you have to go out externally to get these things done. And obviously in the Rivers Trust movement and in CaBA, you know, it's often a project officer who's doing the communications as well as everything else. So yeah, I think tools like Canva are just really invaluable to us, and it means that we can actually do stuff ourselves and not pay out a fortune. Although sometimes you can spend so long doing something that actually sometimes it's worth paying out a bit of money.
Yeah, lots of people saying they've got no questions but lots of ideas now. But I think there is one question from Mike Beard, who's asking if you've got any bad examples.
Just go back a few years from the Rivers Trust.
I don't think I have any specific bad examples, although I will say that I get very embarrassed looking back at the stuff I used to produce. But I think as kind of scientists or as people with a particular investment in these topics, it's so easy to communicate and focus on the things that we find most interesting. And I think that often comes through in these infographics, which are beautifully designed and everything, but the key statistics they pull out just aren't what's relevant to the general public. So I think it's just being aware of what your reader will actually be interested in, rather than focusing on the things that interest you, because I don't think they always align.
Thanks, Emily. And then there's a question from Carol Flux, who's saying, is there any chance of making a template example of how to tell a story on one watercourse? Data's not so important, but just going about how you could do it as an example to get people started. So I wonder if that's, we do have the lots of the catchment partnerships have developed the catchment portals using story maps, but those quite often there's a lot of information in there and quite information heavy. I wonder if it's something that we maybe could pull out for a smaller tributary as an example, with just pulling out some key bits of information for a key story. That could be something that we could do through the training support over the next year and add to the to the CaBA website if you think that's something that would be possible.
Yeah, I think a story map you could mix, it would be really good, you know, scrolling down through the watercourse and showing different things coming in. I think that could be a really good way to show, sort of tell a story. So yeah, I don't know if, yeah, like you say, Lucy, maybe we look into setting up some sort of template, how they could do that.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning we do already have some tutorials on the CaBA website on how to get started using story maps, probably more from the technical side of things. And then we do have some tutorials that Emily did earlier in the year as well, covering some of the things that she's covered today. So those are probably really good way of getting a good start with using the story maps and things. And maybe after you've had a look at those, if there's anything else in particular that you'd like to know about them, then get in touch with us and we can look at that, building that into the training.
Annika's just shared an example. Can we share Canva templates across Rivers Trusts?
Yes, we can. Sure.
We've done that before. Yeah,
yeah.
We've done that before, so I think we can. If you're a user on Canva, then we can add you. That's fine.
I think Abby asked if we'll be sharing a recording. So just so everybody's aware, yes, we have recorded today and we will share it via the CaBA website. So it'll hopefully be up in the next week on there.
And then just before we finish, I just want to flag up our latest State of Our Rivers report, which is a really good example of how you can bring data and a story map together, and hopefully in quite an engaging way, mixing quite heavy data with information. So I'll drop the link in on the chat, so please do go and have a look at it, and yeah, let us know what you think. That's probably it really, isn't it, if no one else has got any questions?
Yeah, I think so. But just again to say thank you to you both. That was a really fascinating session. I know I found it really useful and lots of ideas buzzing, and it seems like lots of other people have said that in the chat. So thank you for that. It's hopefully been a really good session for people today. Thanks.